SJRES 15 apologizes for the several hundred years of wrongs that the federal government has perpetrated against Native Americans.
This is an apology to the Native people from the United States. It's an apology that attempts to start the reconciliation process. It doesn't end the wrongs, but it does acknowledge them. It doesn't fix everything, but it starts the dialogue. I noticed it when I started to travel across my state and meet with tribal leaders and individuals, just this deep-rooted bitterness. And I wondered, what's this about?
These things still live with us today, that intergenerational trauma, that grief, and that sometimes that anger for all the atrocities and wrongdoings. The Trail of Tears, the forced removal from eastern tribes to Indian territory in that time of Oklahoma.
On that trail, people were dying. Babies were crying for milk. Their mothers had no milk to give them.
To the people in Sand Creek, the Cheyenne, who were massacred, men, women, and children were massacred by the United States Cavalry, Colonel John Chivington.
The order was to kill all. He said, do you mean babies and child and young, old? He said, everything.
They ripped open the stomachs of the pregnant women and killed the babies. They killed the women, but then they had to kill the babies. You know, they would have died anyway, but it was intentional killing from the womb.
When our soldiers ripped open the wombs of the Sand Creek pregnant mothers in the massacre of Sand Creek, we realized abortion was back there. We begin to understand that the injustice of abortion was directly related to the broken covenants with our First Nations people.
Many treaties were made between this republic and the American Indian tribes. Unfortunately, too often the United States of America did not uphold its responsibilities as stated in its covenants with the Native American tribes. And too often, Mr. Chairman, our government broke its oath to the Native peoples.
Our parents taught us, our grandparents taught us that the white man was no good and the white man is a liar. Everything he says isn't really true. And they go back to the treaties. How many treaties have the Europeans made with the native people? And just about every one of them have been broken.
These kinds of covenants are legal covenants that God holds the nation accountable for, and unless they're apologized for, the curse keeps coming.
Many times these treaties weren't even intended to be kept, but the church helped with these treaties. Then I look at America. There is a stronghold of a covenant-breaking spirit over America. The divorces. No one trusts anyone else in their word.
The boarding school experiences, not 200 years ago, but one generation ago.
The Native children were taken out of their home by force, removed from their families. Some of them died in the boarding schools, the sexual abuse. They were forced to pray, forced to convert to Jesus Christ, or there was punishment. And I look at our schools in America where we've lost the Bible out of our schools, where we've lost the privilege to pray. And I look back at that root, and I look of how our families are being torn apart.
The Wounded Knee massacre in South Dakota. The Gatling guns turned on men, women, and children in December.
The natives that were here were at peace with the United States. It signed a peace treaty. They didn't have any weapons. It was cold, bitter winter. We've documented over 127 massacres of Native Americans in the United States. We cannot visit these places without feeling the hurt, the sadness.
Dr. Swallow began to tell us about the Washita Massacre. Found out that it was Jay's great-great-grandfather, Chief Black Kettle, who's the peace chief of the Cheyenne tribe, was camped on the Washita River in western Oklahoma when General Custer rode down with his men upon the encampment and slaughtered, we don't know exactly how many, but probably way over 150 of the Native American people there, the Cheyenne people who were encamped peacefully.
I found myself bitter when it came down to that account. Extremely bitter. And Chief Black Kettle was in the leadership.
My heart broke when I saw the site. I began to realize this is real, it really happened, and my forefathers are responsible for it, and I'm so sorry. The Native people, not only the Cheyenne people, but many, many tribes know what took place at that spot. I began to put myself in their place, and I began to realize if my ancestors had been slaughtered, murdered, lied to, killed like that, I would have a lot of bitterness and a lot of resentment in my heart.
We've carried this thing so long, and we have found out that it has hurt us more than it's hurt those that we've been angry with.
We're still very high in suicide. It's out of control in some areas. Our dropout rate with our children is the highest. They don't make it.
On the reservations, really the death that reigns over these places, I believe, cannot be broken in a sense spiritually until there is proper renewing of covenant and the proper apology. They really can't forgive until forgiveness is asked. And from that coming from our government, I think is such a crucial thing.
In introducing this resolution. So this apology resolution, to me, is a giant and historic step to move towards apologizing for those wrongdoings, those ill-fated policies of what happened to the Indian nations, and really begin the healing, because you can't begin the healing unless you say formally by the United States, the Senate that authorized war against the Indians or that forced removal of and uprooted tribes from their homelands. It has to come to this level for the United States government, from the Senate and the House, to do that, to make this apology real.
I think if we get it up for a vote on the floor, it'll pass overwhelmingly. But generally the holdups in these things are that people look at it and say, well, what all does this mean? And then people say, well, I didn't do that. Somebody else may have, but I didn't do that. Why should I be apologizing? Yet, if we're ever going to move forward uniting people, you've got to address it.
A lot of people are afraid, and congressmen and stuff, about reparations and everything, but that's not what it's all about. It's not about, let's set a standard and then we're going to use that to get everything what we ever wanted. That's not what that's about. It's about healing. It's about spiritual healing, emotional healing. They need to hear that, because the Native peoples have been done so wrong. We have been hurt. The wounds on my wife, my children, are so deep.
Our people are hurting. We're at a time that we need to really take care of the past so we can go on.
And I don't believe that we're going to be able to solve the problems that plague our country until we deal with the root issues of how we've treated the Native American people.
And so we're calling on God with Nigel, with Jay Swallow and the American Indian peoples. God, we pray, God, end this thing. Bring an apology from the government of the United States.
It's the greatest opportunity for America to be a model to many nations who have indigenous people in them that are suffering.
How powerful that would be. I think it'd go worldwide, I know it would.
Would truly be an example lead by example for the world to see.
I think that an apology like this is going to restore some of the honor that we have lost in days gone by, so we can walk with our head held high in today's world.
It's time now to be healed, to get rid of this pain. If this apology is received from the non-native world as well as it is from us, then there will be an open heart, say, come, let us become brothers. Let us walk together.